This episode is sponsored by Furniture Box. Check them out in the description below.
Every single person listening or watching this podcast will walk past someone that's homeless over the next few months.
The washing machine project is the brainchild of designer Navjot Sawhney,
an engineer who's making a huge difference.
He's created a manual drive washing machine inspired by the stories of families in refugee camps.
50% of the world don't have access to gas or electricity. I quit my job and I moved to South India.
Do you think it's important to take that risk knowing that you didn't have that safety net?
She said I'm making the biggest mistake of my life.
How does that make you feel?
I love proving people wrong. There is a Netflix documentary coming out.
Oh, wow.
No way, about this?
How does somebody actually go about finding that passion?
It's a really good question. What is the problem and how can I help come to a solution?
How did you get the recognition come from Rishi Sunak?
There are people outside of your doorstep right now that need your support.
What do you think people can do in their day-to-day life?
Rather than getting angry, get informed and educate people.
Guys, welcome to The Ground Floor, the podcast where we ask successful people exactly how they did it. Now, this week's episode is a little bit different, and it's quite an interesting one. We've actually got Navjot Sawhney, who is the founder of the Washing Machine Project, which is a charity. So it's our first charity that we've ever had on the show. And it's a charity that provides a clothes washing solution for low-income communities in the Middle East and the Third World. Now, I'm going to read this next part out because I want to make sure I get all the numbers right, because this really blew my mind. So 70% of the world's population have no access to an electric washing machine. And that's over 5.5 billion people.
Wow.
Which is, it's insane. Yeah. Washing clothes by hand can take up to 20 hours a week, which is obviously a critical barrier to paid work and education for anyone displaced or on low income. And the burden of this is disproportionately carried by the women in these communities too. So you're doing tremendous work for women in all of these low income communities. And obviously you're helping people that are in many cases, extreme poverty. So you're a hero, first of all. It's extremely noble work.
I can't believe that stat.
Yeah, that's mad.
That's actually quite eye-opening. I didn't realise that.
That's mad when you listen back to it. It doesn't feel real.
5.5 billion.
Well, there's like 4 people in this studio, so at least 3 of us will be hand washing our clothes today, tomorrow, and the next day afterwards. So
that's crazy.
It's honestly so hard to even conceptualize.
Yeah.
So obviously a lot of people won't know you or won't know the charity. So if you take them back to the beginning, can you tell them a little bit about you and how this came about?
Yeah. Nav means new in Punjabi, and I was born in London, and I was a very curious child. I was kind of born and raised around Indian parents, so the society was very selfless. It was always about service and giving back to others, so that was inherently ingrained into us. And my father was an aerospace engineer, and he would take me to air shows. I'd be fascinated with how these big aircraft would be in the sky, and I would come home. I would take the toolbox out of the shed and just break everything. And my mum used to get really angry at that because I never knew how to put things back together again, but it really helped in terms of my mind and trying to understand how things worked. So with that in mind, my father passed away when I was very young. I was 8 years old, and I was brought up by my 2 sisters and my mum. So I knew from a very early age the difficulty of what women have to go through in life. So, the kind of giving, the engineering and curiosity, and the women empowerment have all been parallels in my life. So when I went to university, I studied aerospace engineering, and I graduated, and I joined one of the world's best graduate programs. And I felt like I hit cloud 9.
What program was that?
I was at Dyson.
Okay.
So I was there for 3 years, and I realized that every bit of good engineering that I was doing was basically just making a vacuum cleaner for a rich person.
Yeah.
And
when you phrase it like that, it's not very motivational. But okay.
Yeah, but these are incredible products, and they're so desirable, and half the world want them. But I realized that I wanted my engineering to help people to have impact, have positive impact across the world, and really kind of make a mark on people who really need it.
When did that actually come about? What was the sort of turning point from wanting to do this sort of more traditional route in corporate versus actually wanting to help people and add value to the world?
It's a really good question. I think, when I was graduating at university, it was a bit of a you're kind of walking into it blindfold. Like
I think a lot of people do, to be honest. When they leave university, they don't necessarily have a real idea as to exactly what they want to do.
Do you remember your careers?
Neither of us actually went to university.
That's interesting, but
we were the only two kids in our year that didn't go to uni.
We're not better at all.
It doesn't matter.
That's really refreshing to hear. Which we should talk about later, but universities have these careers fairs and they invite pizza shops and they give away free pizza. I just used to get free pizza all the time, and these really fancy companies would come and give out free pens and
sell you the dream,
roll out like really flashy graduates. And I'll be like in awe of these people, but it's like a missile defense company. I'm like, that's obviously not what I want to do in my life. But when I was in that position, I was like, this person was like, the kind of pinnacle of everything that I want to become, which I realized that later on in life I didn't. And about 3 years into my career at Dyson, I wanted to call it quits. But for anyone listening or watching this podcast, anyone from an Asian family, going to your mum and saying, I want to quit my well-paid engineering job to go work for free somewhere else, it wasn't a very good conversation.
It's a suicide mission.
So,
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, but I realized I wasn't happy and I wanted to do something different. So I quit my job and I moved to South India.
Did you have any idea as to exactly what you wanted to do at this stage, out of interest? Or did you just know you sort of wanted to add value and you just were sort of following a path type thing? Or did you have any clarity at this point?
Yeah, so I was searching for opportunities. I knew I wanted to help. I have the skills of engineering, and I applied for a international placement at Engineers Without Borders UK, and they sent me to India. And
what is Engineers Without Borders?
Engineers Without Borders UK is a UK-based charity that provides opportunities to become globally responsible for engineers and non-engineers. So if you're in a boardroom or in a meeting at a missile company, you know exactly the impact of the work that you're doing. And if you don't know, then they teach you.
Right.
Yeah,
and
I've heard of Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah, so it's the engineers equivalent of Doctors Without Borders. And I think that's really important because engineers and non-engineers have the power to help and hinder the planet. These are the people that are going to be creating the next solutions that the world greatly need. And if they don't know the world's problems or the real solutions that are needed, then there's a massive gap.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I'm really passionate about talking about in my career now. But yeah, I landed in India, and I was there for a year and a half in a very rural village, and I was making clean and efficient cooking stoves for half the world's population who have to use wood or dung or coal to cook their food. So, 50% of the world don't have access to gas or electricity, so they use wood.
50%.
I think it's really interesting when we hear these figures of just not necessarily out of touch. That doesn't sound very fair, but just how kind of tough it is for so many people out there. And I think it normally just gets lost by the wayside a lot of the time. So.
And we're in this kind of really fancy studio in
that's
London. It's so far removed from what we're used to. But even I didn't know those figures until I was actually in it, living there and understanding the situation. But these people that have to forage for wood are often women and children, and once they have that wood, they take time and they have to go further and further into forest to get them. And are susceptible to gender-based violence because they're in dangerous places. They have to come back and then they burn the wood, and all of that smoke that they're breathing in is a massive issue. It creates all sorts of medical conditions, and it happens to half the world's population. So
That's half.
Yeah.
Really, half.
yeah.
That's
So that's
insane.
mad, right? And so I was in this village at an organization called Practi. I was innovating these cook stoves. My job, alongside a few other team members, was to create a £10 or 1,000 rupee cooking stove for the Indian market. And on like a normal week would be Monday we'd have an idea, Tuesday we would prototype that idea, Wednesday that prototype would be in the field.
Oh wow, it's that streamlined, is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
and Thursday you'd get initial feedback
Yeah.
on why that prototype is rubbish, and by Friday you'd already have a new idea.
Yeah.
And so that kind of living lab, we called it, where you're constantly iterating and constantly getting feedback and constantly developing your ideas, was amazing. And I knew at that point that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I wanted to create products for people who need it. And the village I was staying in was such an eye-opening experience to me. And there was a lady that lived next door to me, and her name was Divya. She became best friends with me because my Tamil was rubbish and her English was amazing. She learnt her English in high school but never used it since.
Wow.
And she got married at the age of 16. She had 2 kids. She was 31 at the time. And we used to talk about all sorts of subjects, whether it was the latest film release or why she spent hours and hours a day on unpaid labour, and how unfair she felt that was. And whether it was foraging for wood or standing in line for water, water was only switched on for 15 minutes a day, twice a day, 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the evening, or hand washing her clothes. She used to spend hours and hours and hours a day on what is called unpaid labour. And I thought this was so unfair for people like Divya, who wanted to work but just didn't have the time. She was so talented and so smart, but she was being held back from these opportunities that she wanted to pursue because of these tasks that I took for granted.
And that's why you named your creation after her, the Divya.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the penny drop moment for me. And I said to Divya, this is silly. I'm going to buy you an electric washing machine and you just use it. And she said, Nav, I don't have a generator and there's frequent blackouts. So even if I had an electric washing machine, I wouldn't be able to use it when I wanted to use it. And it uses so much water, and water's only switched on 15 minutes a day, twice a day. So it's not an appropriate technology for me. And that's when the penny dropped for me personally, and that's when I promised Divya a manual washing machine back in that village in 2018. So I came back home to London, and I started what is called the Washing Machine Project now, which is very simple. We design, manufacture and distribute manual crank handle washing machines that we call Divya washing machines, after the inspiration behind the organization. And we've created this really amazing device that saves 75% of time and 50% of water compared to hand washing clothes, and we now distribute that across 8 countries around the world. Wow. And have positively impacted 30,000 lives.
That's remarkable.
And that's such a nice backstory as well, to actually finding your passion that a lot of people don't necessarily have.
It's a beautiful story, and I knew the rough outline, but I didn't know it in such detail, and it's a really beautiful story. You should be really proud of what you're doing, man.
Definitely.
I want to take it briefly back to the conversation that you had with your parents, to drop out of Dyson and go and do this work. 'Cause obviously, as you said, it's amazing work, but
That's a difficult conversation to have, especially with your background. And I think there's probably a good chance that there are a lot of people listening to this that maybe for whatever reason would like to leave what they're doing to pursue something else. And they also come from an Asian household or maybe a strict household where, they don't feel like they have that opportunity. How did that conversation go and how did you address it and what was the outcome?
Yeah, it's really difficult and no one supported me when I wanted to quit my job. But my mum particularly, she said, I think I quote, I'm making the biggest mistake of my life, and now she's my biggest fan.
Really?
She, I caught her the other day showing one of our news articles to the mechanic when she was taking the car in for repair. So huge fan now, but you kind of had to prove yourself.
How does that make you feel?
Amazing. Yeah.
I mean more. I mean that is amazing, but I mean more. How does it make you feel? Do you have any element of, well, you didn't believe in me then, and now you guys all believe in me?
Yeah.
Is there any anger there, or any resentment, or anything, or is it just pure bliss, or how do you feel?
No, it's a really good reflection point. I love proving people wrong, and I love when people say you can't do something, and time again, I think anyone starting their own organization has to have that resilience, because you're going to have so many people that say, no, actually you can't do it, or it's never been done before, so you can't do it. And I think that resilience is really, really important to have. And I love it when I love to hear the fact that we can't do something, because I wanna prove people wrong. But it's a balance now with a bit of realism and saying, actually, it's impossible. Or
So how did you have that conversation? Like I said, people listening that might be dreading that kind of conversation with their parents. How did you go about it?
Yeah, and I come across countless people that are really frustrated in their jobs right now, pushing Excel spreadsheets, and people that are going through kind of different internal crises. Who approach me on a kind of weekly basis, whether it's through LinkedIn messages or whatever it is, to say, can I help, or can I have a job, etc. So I really do empathize with those people, because I was one of those people, and I was genuinely unhappy, and that's no disrespect to my former colleagues or some of my good friends that are still at those types of companies, because they genuinely love what they do. But for me and my passion and what I want to do in my life, and life is so finite, and maybe that's because of the early trauma of my father passing away, and the realism of having a very short life and short time on this planet.
It puts it into context.
Yeah, it puts it in context, right? And I was genuinely unhappy, and I actively looked for something that was semi-aligned to what I was doing, although I wasn't going to get paid for it, but it was kind of down the right path, and that helped. But the funny thing was, I actually begged for my job to come back to. So at the time, I said to my employers that, please, could you keep my job available for me for when I come back, but they didn't have a sabbatical policy, and I remember there was multiple emails flying back and forth from me kind of pleading with them to let me back. And even at that point I was saying, taking the risk averse approach and saying, there'll be a job waiting for me when I come back, but they didn't allow that, and I'm so thankful for that, because I wouldn't have jumped into the opportunity of starting something like the washing machine project.
Do you think it's important to take that risk, knowing that you didn't have that safety net?
Yeah, I was just about to get into. I would also caveat that this is a very tough, hard, and lonely journey. Like the hustle mentality of entrepreneurship is really underplayed and or overplayed, and the glamorization of entrepreneurship is very, very, very overplayed. But no one will ever tell you the sleepless nights, the not making payroll, the difficulties of getting funding, and I think that's so important for anyone that is deciding to quit your job or not finding the kind of passion in what you're doing right now. I would say start something, new or pursue some of your passions, but do it in the way that you can balance the books and pay for your bills and when you can't do both at the same time, and when you're working tirelessly on both projects, that's the point where you're like, actually no, this is where I step back, you know.
What's your advice to someone who doesn't necessarily have something that they immediately want to go into? They're unhappy in their role at Dyson, for example, in an engineering role, and they're on a very predictable path, albeit a very good path, but a very predictable path. But they know they don't want to be on that path, but they don't necessarily know what they want to jump into. Obviously, you had the experience in India meeting Divya, and that sort of sparked your passion. But how does somebody actually go about finding that driver or that passion to then wanting to go into it and build something?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and my answer to that would be to really just learn and shadow and get mentored in different industries. So for example, when I came back from India and I was clueless about the world of humanitarianism, I did a few things. So I started a master's. I went back to the university and did a master's in humanitarianism at the University of Bath, but I also messaged as many people as I could that I thought that I want to be like in 5 years.
Okay.
Blank on LinkedIn, and I said, please could I have half an hour of your time just to ask some questions, and that really kind of built my knowledge and of the industry and what ways I would probably want to take it.
I think a lot of people really underestimate. We always talk about it, but the power of just asking people. You know, if you look at people who are in a position where you want to be in X period of time, just reach out to them and ask if you can have some time for a meeting or coffee or something. But yeah, a lot of people just really underestimate the power of that.
It's a free shot.
It is.
Especially a free shot costs you nothing.
Exactly, and
like this infinite upside.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys have had opportunities where you don't know something, you just ask someone, and then it pushes you the kind of boundaries a bit more. So for example, when I started the washing machine project, I still have this message today where I messaged my friend Alex, who was working at my previous employer, and I said, please could you help me? And he helped me with my first few designs, and we went out to Iraq together to test some of the machines that we were designing. And it is your network, when you start something, it's your friends and family and your network around you who will be your first supporters and your first customers and your first funders. And I think that's really, really important. There's so many people around you that want to help you, and people are afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that's how you got on the show. We got a DM on our Instagram page,
very true,
from someone on your team.
Yeah,
it was like, we'd love to have our guy on the show.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I'd never heard of the charity, and then I looked into it, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, just ask.
Yeah, just ask and see how far you get. So.
I wanted to ask as well. Do you reckon it's sort of it's easier to be content when you're aware of how bad it is for a lot of people around the world, because you're obviously on the front line and you've got direct exposure to it, versus people in a Western society who underestimate the privileges that they've actually got on a daily basis and get wrapped up in their own shit on a day-to-day? Do you reckon it's just it's easier, or like how does that sort of play on your mind?
Yeah, I feel so lucky and privileged to wake up every day and lead this organization, because people are doing it tough out there, and we get to see that every single day with our work. And I feel so privileged to have a very small impact on their lives, a positive impact, and the solutions that we're creating are so needed. Someone hand washing their clothes on their hands and knees in cold water, causing back pain, joint pain, and skin irritation for 20 hours a week in 2023 is really frustrating for me personally. And when you see it firsthand, you get a new lease of life. I need to work harder for this person, or I need to work smarter, or we all need to collectively do something for this person and the next person. And it's examples that you never even really heard of. So we got started because of Divya, the lady in the village, who I met in 2018. But I've spent the last few days in America with homeless communities, and every single person listening or watching this podcast will walk past someone that's homeless over the next few months. And those people need a solution that keeps their clothes clean. And right now they don't have a sustainable solution. And it's interesting that you don't, this is not a far away issue. These are issues that happen on our streets around us as well.
I've got a question that I've been thinking about for a little while, and I heard someone say this once, and I think because you're the first person we've had on here that has their own charity, especially one that helps people abroad, I'd be really curious to hear your perspective on it. I was speaking to someone once, and they said, one of my issues, I think they said they prefer to give their money to people that they see, like you said, like homeless people that they see on the streets or in person, or people that they know in their community, because the quote unquote sort of Africa stuff that they see, you know, with like things like comic relief, that sort of thing, they say there's kind of been a numbness to it in a way, culturally, I'd say, because it's been around for so long, and people sort of, I think that's a shame, because I think it means people lose faith in the work that is being done. And we know that there's so much amazing work being done by, you know, things like comic relief, by things like, you know, the work that you're doing. What do you think about people's kind of I guess cultural numbing, you know, because they see the adverts, they see the TV stuff, and they go, where's the money really going? Hasn't it been long enough now? It seems like, you know, it's kind of the same now that it was then. And I thought that was an interesting point, and I think it's a bit of a shame, but I'd love to get your opinion on it.
Yeah, it's a really valid point, and donor fatigue is what it's called, where people just get tired of giving to the same cause. And funny enough, I don't know if you saw the reports of the defense minister yesterday saying to the Ukrainian government, they were not the Amazon of weapons. So I think that the quote there was basically, there's maybe a slight frustration that the UK government is supporting the Ukrainian government so much during this kind of war that they're going through. So it happens on a governmental level as well, where you saw a couple of years ago the US pull out of Afghanistan after 20 years of war. So it's tough, and there's need all over the world, and where do you start, right? It's that you see these things and you feel so helpless. You know, like my pound or my dollar, my money is so worthless to the bigger impact of this issue. But I'd like to cast your mind back to 2020, when we were all locked up in our rooms during COVID, and how helpless we all felt. And I don't know about you, but we were inundated with people that wanted to support. I think COVID all taught us that we're mortal, and that we want to give back to society. You know, people out there clapping for carers and packing people's bags and giving people food to everyone that needed it.
I think it definitely brought some people together.
Right? And community. And I think we're inherently community driven and like to be together. That's why the lockdown was so frustrating for all of us. And I always say that you don't have to fly across the world to give. There are people outside of your doorstep right now that need your support, you know, and they probably don't need your money either. They probably need your time or your skills, or your advocacy or your support. So money isn't the only way that you could support good causes around the world, and I think that's something important to bear in mind as well.
Was it easy for you to, for lack of a better phrase, sort of turn your back on financial freedom and money to pursue a value add to people that need it most? Because I can imagine that must have been a very difficult turning point, especially after 3 years in what is a very, very reputable company and a good job earning good money. Yeah,
you mentioned it, right? This traditional path. I was on a traditional path where I studied all my life. I graduated with a degree. I then joined a good company, one of the country's best companies in my industry, and I had a path laid out for me if I wanted to pursue it, and that was my life. And to then take a sidestep and say, hey, actually no, I don't want to do that, is a very difficult decision. And it was very dark, you know, to think that I wouldn't have a salary next month, and I wouldn't know where my next job would come if I wanted to pursue it. That as a young person who had a very traditional path up until that point was very, very hard to reconcile.
How do you get your head around?
Yeah, but the need and the want of wanting to make impact, wanting to make positive impact was so great, and it outweighed the traditional path. And I think that's how I reconciled the decision, and that's how I got over it. I knew that this is what I want to do, and the realization of the need and being out in India and seeing the problems there and then, whether it was cooking or cleaning or washing clothes or even like air conditioning. It was 50-degree heat, and that was an issue for everyone around us. But there's no sustainable solution right now for those kinds of things.
What's the situation with Divya now? Have you guys stayed in touch? Does she know that she's got a whole life-saving instrument named after her?
Yeah, it's super inspirational to talk to Divya. We talk to her on a weekly basis, and we'll be sending our newest machine. It's called the Divya 1.65 in a couple of months. There's some amazing announcements coming up later in the year that is going to really kind of tenfold our impact. And I'm really excited to bring everyone along on the journey with us.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second to talk about our sponsor for this episode, Furniture Box. Furniture Box is an online furniture retailer that makes awesome products for everywhere from your bedroom to your office. Now, we actually had Monty and Dan, the co-founders, on our show. That's how we met. We loved their story, and we hung out with them afterwards, and we knew that we wanted to work with them. And here's the thing. One of the biggest issues I have whenever I've ordered furniture in the past is that certain big name furniture companies, not naming any names, will charge you a fairly large fee for delivery, and even then that delivery usually takes a few days, if not longer. With Furniture Box, not only do they offer free next day delivery, but they're now planning on extending their delivery cutoff even more so that you can literally order a dining set as late as 8 p.m. and be eating dinner on it the next day. So to put it simply, there's no one in the UK furniture scene that's doing anything like what they're doing, and we're thrilled to have them as our sponsor. So click the link in the description and check them out. Now back to the episode. What do you say to people who, and it's quite a common, I think, quite a common charity objection. What do you say when people say to you, you know, how do I know where my money's going? Which I think is probably the most common charity objection people give.
Yeah, it's so by a law and obligation, a charity has to report through an annual summary of how they have spent that money to the Charities Commission, and that's publicly available online. So if you don't have any transparency from your charity that you're giving to, you should, because it's a legal obligation too. So that's one thing. The second thing is you don't have to give money to support charity. People are skill sharing, skill swapping, advocating, giving time, and that's equally, if not more, helpful and useful to charities than actually just putting a pound in the jar.
So the second question, sort of leading on from that, I suppose, is for anyone listening that might have an idea of a way they can help, or someone who might have an idea for a charity they'd like to start. We've never had someone on, like I said, who started their own charity. So what's the process like for that? How does it work with raising funding? How does it work with getting it set up and the actual structural side of it? Someone wants to build a charity.
Yeah, I remember when I started the washing machine project in 2018, 2019, I had this blank canvas and this idea that there's this issue that I saw, and there needed to be a solution, and it's very easy to say, oh, just start a charity and that'll be the end of it. But actually, I think it's important to step back and say, what is the problem and how can I help come to a solution for that problem? And there are many charities doing amazing things. And so my question is it needed? You know, is your charity needed? Is your idea needed? Is there a gap that you can fill with your organization? And if there isn't, and there's support that you can give to another organization that's already doing something similar to yours, then great. I think that's really important to understand, that people rush to start a new organization without really trying to understand where they can help or fill in a gap. So, for example, if people are frustrated at the homelessness in their community and they want to help with the homelessness in the community by alleviating that burden, is there an organization in the community that's already helping someone in another community that then can come to your community and grow that organization? And so that's the first step. And the second step is, if you've gone through that process and you believe that there's a true gap, really understand the problem by asking those people directly, what is your issue? And I think too much time is spent in the lab or on the back of a desk or behind a computer screen doing desktop research, and not enough time has been spent in the field or speaking to the community that you're trying to serve. And I think that's so important, because if you don't know their true lived experiences or their problems, then how are you going to come up with the solutions? So spend as much time as you can learning from the people that you're trying to support. And then after all of that, when you've really understood the problems, there's a gap, there's no one doing it, then you consider starting an organization and getting together like-minded people that believe in your mission and your vision and are aligned with your values.
So you'd sort of build a team before you go out to actually go and get funding.
Yeah. So and that the team is a very loose term. These are kind of volunteers that want to support your cause and mission, and especially with causes with purpose, you'll find that people want to help you more than perhaps a traditional for-profit enterprise like a ride-hailing app or a dating app or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, for the funding side of things, how does that work? Raising funding for a charity?
It's very hard. Yeah, I mean, in the first instances, I used to pay for stuff out of my own pocket, and I had a bit of savings that I'd just pay for things, whether it's prototyping or going on a field visit, etc. But more and more, we kind of focused on the storytelling piece of the impact of some of this work that we're doing, and connecting the beneficiary to the donor, and highlighting the importance of that donor and the crucial donations that they bring to the organization. And so we set up a GoFundMe, and we were lucky enough to get a few news features earlier on, and those went viral. And then we had a GoFundMe that raised lots of money to then sustain our organization.
And then you got external funding after that?
Yeah, so the washing machine project during COVID got a massive corporate partnership with RS Group, which is a FTSE 100 company. They chose us as a good cause for the 3 years that we would be with them, and that was a global partnership to the tune of about £1 million.
And how does that partnership work exactly?
It's threefold. So it's employee volunteering, fundraising, and awareness raising as well. So yeah, and I'm really excited to say that they've now kind of renewed that partnership, and it'll be going for another 3 years.
It's interesting because raising funding for a charity is obviously very different to raising funding for a company, because when you're approaching people to raise money for your company, they're thinking, okay, how much money can I make off the back of this? Whereas with this, it's like, do you care enough about what I'm doing, knowing that this is money you have to get rid of? You're not seeing it again, but you're hoping that it's going to help people and add value for it. It's a completely different mentality shift.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, it's a growing aspect right now. So, the COVID thing of being immortal and people wanting to help, the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations have launched, the 2030 goals, where every single company, every single organization, whether it's a FTSE 100 or micro enterprise, is aligning themselves to various sustainable development goals, whether it's no poverty or gender inequality. There's always one organization aligning something to something, and and they're actively looking for social giving. Employees are asking their employers, what are you doing to help society? And the Gen Zs amongst us are getting really angry and pissed off at the world that they're inheriting. So it's a kind of melting pot of various different things, where there's a positive shift towards good causes, and we're really feeling that right now as well.
So how do you actually go about continuing to raise awareness then, for the washing machine product? You mentioned that you were in a couple of news articles before you did the GoFundMe page, but post that, how do you continue to go about raising awareness?
Yeah, so we've actually been featured in over 500 news outlets.
Wow, 500
around the world.
Is that you sort of proactively reaching out to them? Is that them reaching out to you?
So yeah, we've spent nothing on zero on marketing.
Do you have a PR person? Because I don't think it was you that messaged me directly.
Yeah, we have one amazing person who works on all of our social media, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram or anything like that. But we've been really lucky at telling the story of Divya and every single other person that we supported along the journey. And there is a Netflix documentary coming out.
Oh wow!
No way about this
towards the end of the year. So that's
dude,
really
congratulations!
Yeah,
that's
huge.
awesome. What?
cool. Yeah.
How did we not? Is that public knowledge?
No, it's not. So
Is this the first time you mentioned
this
it?
is the first time.
This is a TGF exclusive, baby.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There's
Okay.
a Netflix documentary coming out about the washing machine project.
One episode.
One
so,
episode.
When's it coming out?
Towards the end of the year. We don't have an exact date yet. But
Dude, that's going to be huge for you, man. Congratulations.
huge.
That's
Yeah.
massive.
How did that come about?
Yeah.
How did you get a Netflix documentary made?
just organically. So
Okay.
there's loads of things. Even back in May, we got invited to the King's coronation to be one of the guests of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, you think you got a letter from Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, but we had lunch with him on 10 Downing Street and Jill Biden as well. So I was
Wow.
there.
Oh wow. Okay.
Okay, we're going to come back to that. But
Okay.
yeah, go
So
on.
people really get it. People get this mission that we're on. Everyone washes clothes. Everyone likes to wear clean clothes. Everyone has to wear clean clothes. So I think people understand that there's a need here, and they want to help. And we're really appreciative of all the traction that we're getting in such a short space of time, and really excited about the future.
I feel like there's a lot of synergies between actually starting a charity versus starting a company. In that
Massively,
you need to find a product market fit almost.
You need
before
the right people.
Yeah,
as
you need
well.
the right people. You need to see there's a demand for what you're looking to do, and
Team,
not just
funding, runway, everything.
there's actually a lot of synergies with it. Because I can't imagine you get the same level of success that you would have got today if you were doing something that had already been done, if you like, just in a slightly different way.
Yeah, and also doing it sustainably as well. So we're really passionate about sustainability of the organisation as well. So how can we make or create revenue models that don't just rely on giving? Other products and services like laundrettes, for example, in communities where people can use our machine but also make some money off it.
To then put back into the charity.
into
That's
the
interesting,
money.
yeah, because you only really think of one revenue stream
Yeah.
with charities, which is just donations.
Yeah, but there's multiple ways of getting money, and that's the same as a for-profit limited company as well.
I was gonna say, how did you get the recognition come from Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, that's
how
what I was gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that sort of come about?
Yeah, so this was an award called the Point of Lights Award. It's a cross-party award that's been given by the Prime Minister of the UK since, I think, Theresa May's time, probably 2017, 2018 times. And it awards local or organisations or community champions that are doing good for society. And so the recent work that we've been doing for Ukrainian refugees in Poland was recognized as something that was good, doing community good, and all the kind of other traction elements that we're leading with, whether it's homeless communities here in the UK or refugees in Iraq and Lebanon, or an orphanage in Uganda. So there's a multiple of things, but yeah, it was the Ukrainian refugee support that we did in Poland, that we were awarded the Points of Light Award for.
What was Rishi like, sort of off camera, when he's not, being the Prime Minister?
I took my mum, and my mum has worked as a civil servant for 40 years, and she retired this year, back in April, and we got the invite in May, and what better way to celebrate her retirement than taking her to 10 Downing Street for lunch on the streets of 10 Downing Street. So it was a pretty surreal thing for her, and she was absolutely gassed. She wore her best sari, which was a royal blue sari. She looked like a Tory donor, although she's not that way inclined. But she was so impressed to meet Rishi, who is the UK's first Asian Prime Minister, and I'm from Asian heritage. And there's this really funny conversation online between Rishi and my mum, where my mum said to Rishi, "I'm so proud of you," to Rishi. And Rishi was like, "Why are you proud of me? You should be proud of your son." And my mum was like, yeah, I know, but I'm so proud of you." Which was hilarious. And he actually greeted my mum by saying, "Namaste, Auntie Ji," which was really impressive, because, we're Indian. And for my mum, that was really respectful. So, whatever your political affiliations are, and, whatever policies that he has, I thought that was really respectful.
That's a really nice little insight.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, as someone who has essentially given up the pursuit of their own self-interest for the betterment of others, which is what you're doing, how does it make you feel when you're around other people who are doing something that is self-serving? Do you ever get any feeling of like, you're just doing this to make money, you just bought this car, you're doing this job, you're going here, like you should be helping out, there's so many people that are in, because you're seeing firsthand, you're literally on the front lines of seeing some of the worst conditions in the world of humanity, and does it ever make you, I don't want to say angry, but resentful, or a bit like, does it make you irritated?
It did at the start, for sure. And I remember when I came home after that year and a half or so in India, and I had this massive reverse culture shock. It's called reverse culture shock, where you spend a lot of time in one situation, and you come back to a very comfortable situation, and you're just your brain is fried and frazzled, and you don't know how to empathize with both things, and that's why you get so much burnout in humanitarianism. I remember when I came back home from India, I sat on the floor for 6 months eating my food with my hand, because I was like, why do I need to sit on a chair? Why do I need to eat with a fork and knife? I remember those kinds of things. And my mum actually gave me a really good piece of advice, and she was like, "Nav, no one has changed apart from you. So really meet people where they are, because no one has changed apart from you." And I thought that was really important. Rather than getting angry, get informed and educate people. And that's what I'm doing, you guys now know the issue, and it's up to you to take that forwards and deal with that however you want to do. And that's my job, is to keep Divya and every other person that we speak to in the spotlight, and keep talking about it.
With something like the culture shock that you experienced coming back from India, you said eating on the floor, eating with your hands, things like that. At what point did you transition out of that, and what made you go from that mindset? Because I think that's an interesting thing that you mentioned, and I'd like to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I think humans are have a very short-term memory, right? 3 years ago, we were all locked up in a room, in our rooms, and that was our way of life for about a year and a half. And now we can't fathom that ever happening. So we have very short-term memories, and very quickly do we forget how appreciative we should be. And so you do kind of grow out of those phases or seasons, I call it, and that's why it's so important to keep going back to the field, and keep giving, and keep piloting, and keep listening to the people that have these problems, because that you need to keep that in your mind every time you design a product or create a campaign or tell a story or fundraise, and that's how I continue to remain empathetic.
What do you think people can do in their day-to-day life to actually, I suppose, add good or sort of be good to the world and sort of add value to it in one way, other than just donating money and having some money sort of dribbling out of their account every month, making them feel like they're doing something? What's something slightly more tangible that you think everyone could be doing to really help those that need it?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people that are listening and watching this podcast that want to support in one way, shape or form, whether it's the Washing Machine Project or another organisation that they really want to help with or start something themselves. And I think it's important to start small and do it sustainably. So, give sustainably, whether it's your time, money or effort or skills. My advice to anyone that wants to do something but doesn't know what is really just try and understand what is it that you're aligned with and what's your passion and where do you want to give, where do you see the gap, and then do it. Just do something, whether it's even just talking about it, write to your MP, become an advocate of something. There's so many problems in society, whether it's homelessness, the gender inequality, the kind of inequality in wealth, not even talking about immigration and in access to basic appliances, etc. So I read a statistic where I was supporting a cause called I Can You Can too, which is a charity in London that provides hot meals to kids who are on free school meals. And I came across this statistic that 1 out of 3 people in London live on the poverty line.
1 in 3.
Yeah, and
live below the poverty line.
Yeah.
Wow.
And 30% of Londoners have no access to a laptop or a smartphone.
13%.
30. Yeah.
Have no access to a phone or a laptop.
Yeah, smartphone.
And that's in London.
It's in London. So it's like you don't have to. You don't have to
go very far.
Yeah. If you live in London, those are big things that you could get behind. But those are just two things. There's so many other causes that you need to understand and you need to learn about. And so educate yourself is what I'd advise.
You got to find what you're passionate about, the issue that speaks to you. It is crazy how so out of touch we are. I mean, like,
yeah, no, it does. It really does put it in perspective when you sit here and you hear these stats.
I don't know about you, but I mean, my mind's just like, it's so shaken by some of the numbers that you've dropped today. Because you walk around, there's poverty in London, that there's issues in London, but you think in one of the world's most developed cities. 1 in 3 people don't have a laptop or a phone. Yeah,
in London. Yeah, and so this charity I Can You Can too, they provide hot meals and free meals across Christmas and Easter, and I had 8 boxes that I needed to deliver to 8 addresses basically, and each address it was just poverty after poverty, and this is in North London. And you'd never see it because it's outside of mind. These are working poor people living hand to mouth, who are working but just don't have enough to pay the bills. And it's happening more so now than ever because of inflation, interest rates, etc. And it's so important that you need to help people. So my advice is just be kind, because you just don't know what people are going through right now, whether it's on the tube or the bus. Or down the street.
I think that's definitely fallen by the wayside for a lot of people, and I think as we said earlier, a lot of people get caught up in their own day to day that they actually forget that, whether you're on the tube or you're in a coffee shop or wherever it might be, that actually just being nice to someone is quite memorable. Because it just doesn't happen very often.
Especially with the homeless as well. I remember I was at a train station once. And a homeless guy came up to me and he asked me for a cigarette, and I gave him a cigarette, and we were kind of chatting a little bit, and we ended up talking for about like half an hour. And I was like, look, are you homeless? Do you need any help? And I went to a cash point and I got him some money. But what was interesting was like he was really thankful for the money and everything, and that was fine. But he was really just so thankful that I just honestly had a chat with him, and he told me about some of the things that happened to him, and it really is like it is shocking. Like
I bet it's disgusting.
Some of the worst like possible human behavior you can ever imagine, and he's
quite
like
traumatic.
You're quite so traumatic, and how that you're so invisible, and if you're not invisible, it's so easy to be abused in those situations. And just people just honestly just don't even treat you like you're human. And so just the value of even just if you do see someone like in your area or whatever who's homeless, just going over and like, obviously help with money, especially if you can, but just have a chat. Just to make them feel human.
It's everyone wants some sort of attention, right? And when you cast aside a section of society and just kind of ignore them, that's so toxic, and it's not a sustainable solution. You reminded me of a situation that I was volunteering for my local homeless shelter, where we were giving food one winter, and I was giving food to the homeless, and it's an overnight shelter, so homeless people come and sleep in the shelter. And I saw one of my school friends in the year above in the shelter sleeping rough, and I was like, what happened? And he said, I don't have any family, and I lost my job, and I therefore couldn't pay my rent, and I had nowhere to go, so I found myself on the street. And one in three people in this country are a paycheck away from homelessness right now.
So 1 in 3.
Really? In the country.
I remember.
So these are systemic issues in society.
Yeah, and again, I think it's just like what you said. It's like it's not just that the person that you see where you like, well, that makes sense, they're homeless. It is people where not that it makes sense, but as in there's people that have obviously a much harder time than other people. But as you said, there are people that are much closer to it than others. I remember about 5 years ago, a girlfriend I was with at the time, she volunteered at a homeless shelter, and she'd never done it before, and she came back and I said, how was it? Like, what was the most kind of biggest thing that you learned from the experience? And she said the biggest thing is I wasn't expecting to see so many people there that were like in suits. And I was like, what? And she was like, there were people who they work just regular white collar jobs, and they just fell on a hard time or a month or two of bad luck, where they couldn't make their rent that month, and then it snowballs obviously, and they were just there and they needed a meal. It's just like, it's insane.
And we speak to the washing machine project, washes many of these people's clothes, and what they're telling us is they need to have clean clothes for work, or they need to have clean clothes to go on the public transport, and it's just dignity. Everyone wants to feel clean, and those kind of connections or services is really important for these people. So I think it's important to talk about.
Absolutely. I'm going to wrap up with the final question that we ask everyone on this show, but I'm going to tweak it slightly for you, because obviously you're the first charity that we've had. This has been a really intense conversation. Really, really hard hitting.
Eye-opening.
Eye-opening. I'm a little lost for words. Anyway, our final question is, we like to ask everyone that comes on the show, obviously the point of the ground floor is to ask people exactly how they did it, so we like to focus on practical advice. We normally ask people if there was one piece of practical or tangible advice that you can give to someone who might be looking to start a business, what would it be? So, less, believe in yourself, and more, this is something that's actionable. In your case, if you could give one piece of advice that's looking to start a charity, what would it be?
I say to everyone, focus on the problem, because the solution will always change. And for me, the problem was that there is no sustainable solution where people who don't have access to electric washing machine can wash their clothes. And as long as you focus on that and keep focusing on that, whether it's a manual washing machine or a laundrette or a service, that will come later, but just keep focusing on the problem and keep telling people about this issue, because that's half the battle. If people know, then people gather and support around you. So that was my first piece of advice, which is, get to know and understand the problem, and really fall in love with that problem, and then tell people, and get as many people around you as possible that are willing to support you.
Thank you so much. That's a great answer. Nav, you're a remarkable guy, and this has been honestly a really eye-opening conversation, and I really appreciate you giving your time and coming down here to tell your story. So thank you. For anyone listening, I'm sure people will be really eager to help however they can. So straight into the camera over there, where can people find you and how can they help?
So thank you very much for the support, and if you made it this far, appreciate it. You can go on to thewashingmachineproject.org and learn all the ways that you can support, from donating your time to volunteer with us, or to donate a machine to a refugee or around the world. So thewashingmachineproject.org.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Guys, never had a conversation like that before. Really, really hard hitting. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe and everything this time. You guys already know. I'm just going to ask you to, if you see someone that needs help someone before the next episode. I think that's a good way to end it. Navjot, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
A real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.